writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 58321, take that plate away. She has not earned it. Emily Carter froze as the last warm plate of food was lifted from her hands. Around her, the mating ball glittered beneath hundreds of golden candles, crystal chandeliers, and silver banners bearing the crest of the royal pack. Music drifted through the ballroom, laughter rising from tables overflowing with roasted chicken, warm bread, mashed potatoes, fresh fruit, and rich desserts. Emily had been standing for nearly 4 hours. She had carried trays, refilled glasses, adjusted chairs, and cleaned spills while everyone else celebrated. And she had not eaten a single bite. Victoria Carter smiled sweetly as she placed Emily's untouched plate on her own table. "You're here to serve tonight, Emily. Not to embarrass our family." Emily lowered her eyes. Her stomach ached with hunger, but she refused to let anyone see it. "Of course," she whispered. Victoria turned back toward the guests, leaving Emily alone beside the long serving table. Emily took a slow breath and steadied her hands. She had learned a long time ago that complaining only made people crueler. So she kept working. When an elderly guest struggled to carry her drink, Emily quietly helped her. When a young Omega child looked longingly toward the dessert table, Emily slipped a small roll onto his plate. It was the last piece of bread within reach. Emily gave it away without hesitation. She would go hungry a little longer. At least someone else would not. She did not notice the man watching from the far end of the ballroom. Alpha King Alexander Blackwood had entered only moments earlier, and the entire room seemed to change around him. Conversation softened. Guests straightened. Nobles who had been laughing moments before suddenly became careful with every word. Alexander's pale eyes moved across the crowded hall, passing over jeweled gowns and polished smiles. Then they stopped. On a young woman standing alone near the servants' table. Emily felt a strange chill before she ever looked up. For one brief second, her eyes met his. She immediately lowered them again. She did not know why the Alpha King's attention unsettled her. She only knew she did not belong in his world. Alexander looked toward the table in front of Emily. Empty. Then toward Victoria's place. Covered with food. His expression did not change, but something in his gaze hardened with quiet attention. He turned slightly toward the royal steward standing beside him. "Who is that girl?" he asked. The steward followed his gaze. "Emily Carter, Your Majesty. She is part of the Carter household." Alexander watched as Emily picked up another empty tray. Then he noticed her hand trembling. His voice became quieter. "Has she eaten tonight?" The steward hesitated. And that hesitation told the king everything, SUA, the ballroom had barely recovered from the king's arrival when the music began again. Emily kept her eyes lowered, pretending not to notice the royal steward watching her from across the room. She returned to her duties, collecting empty glasses and carrying trays between the crowded tables, but the question she had overheard remained in her mind. Has she eaten tonight? No one had ever asked that before. Not at a gathering like this. Not when she was expected to be useful and invisible at the same time. At the center of the ballroom, Victoria Carter was already surrounded by admirers. Her golden dress caught the candlelight with every graceful movement, and she laughed as though the entire evening had been arranged for her. Emily tried to focus on the work in her hands. She had survived worse nights than this. She could survive one more. Then the orchestra stopped. The sudden silence traveled through the ballroom like a wave. Every guest turned toward the raised platform where the Alpha King stood. Alexander Blackwood did not need to raise his voice to command attention. His presence alone was enough. He looked across the room, calm and unreadable, before speaking. Continue. The musicians obeyed, but the mood had changed. Emily felt hundreds of eyes return to their conversations, yet one gaze remained fixed on her. She reached for another tray. Her fingers were still trembling. She hoped no one noticed. Alexander did. From his place near the royal table, he watched her move quietly between the guests. He saw her pause when a servant dropped a napkin. He saw her bend to pick it up. He saw her smile reassuringly at the nervous young servant before continuing on. Nothing about Emily demanded attention. That seemed to be precisely why he noticed her. Victoria noticed too. Her smile faded for only a moment before she leaned toward one of her friends. "The king is looking this way," she whispered. Her friend glanced toward Emily and frowned. At her. Victoria's expression tightened. He is probably looking past her. But Alexander was not looking past anyone. He watched Emily return to the serving table. There, she found the small plate she had given to the hungry child earlier. Empty. She smiled softly. At least he had eaten. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found the royal steward standing there. "Emily Carter," he said. Her heart skipped. "Yes, sir. His Majesty has a question for you." Emily's face went pale. She immediately wondered what she had done wrong. Had she spilled something? Forgotten a guest? Broken some rule she did not know existed? She looked toward the royal table. Alexander was still watching her. "What kind of question?" she asked. The steward's expression softened. "He wants to know why you have not eaten." Emily swallowed. Around them, the ballroom continued to sparkle with music and laughter, but suddenly she could hear only the quiet sound of her own breathing. She looked down at her empty hands. "Because," she said softly, "there was not enough food for everyone." The steward stared at her. Then Alexander rose from his chair. The entire ballroom fell silent again. The ballroom fell silent as Alexander Blackwood rose from his chair. Emily stood beside the serving table, suddenly aware of every heartbeat around her. She had never imagined that the Alpha King would notice her, much less stop an entire celebration because of something as simple as a meal. Victoria was the first to speak. "Your Majesty, surely this is unnecessary." Alexander turned toward her. His expression remained calm. "I asked a question." Victoria's smile became uncertain. "Emily is part of our household staff. She understands that everyone has duties tonight." "That was not my question." His voice was quiet, but the room seemed to listen more closely. Emily lowered her head. She wished the floor would open beneath her. She had spent years learning how to disappear whenever important people entered a room. Now hundreds of guests were staring at her. Alexander looked at the royal steward. "Bring her a full dinner." Emily immediately shook her head. "Please, Your Majesty. I am fine." His eyes returned to hers. "You are not." The words were gentle, not cruel. Somehow, that made her chest tighten. Victoria stepped forward. "She is being dramatic. She has always been sensitive." Emily's cheeks warmed. "I am not trying to cause trouble." Alexander studied her for a moment. "Then tell me the truth. Why did you give your food to that child?" Emily glanced toward the little boy sitting with his family. He was quietly eating the roll she had given him. He looked hungry. "And you were not?" Emily hesitated. "I was." A murmur moved through the ballroom. Alexander's gaze sharpened. "Then why did you give it away?" Emily looked down at her hands. "Because he needed it more." No one spoke. For a moment, even Victoria seemed to have forgotten how to respond. Alexander slowly walked down from the raised platform. Each step brought him closer to Emily, but there was nothing threatening in his manner. He stopped several feet away, leaving her enough space to breathe. "What is your name?" "Emily Carter." "How long have you been working tonight?" "Almost 4 hours." "And how long since you last ate?" Emily swallowed. Since breakfast. A quiet gasp came from somewhere in the crowd. Alexander looked toward the tables overflowing with food. Then he looked back at Emily. You have been serving dinner for 4 hours after eating breakfast this morning? Yes, Your Majesty. Victoria quickly interrupted. She was offered food earlier. Emily did not defend herself. She simply lowered her eyes. Alexander noticed. He turned to the steward. Find out who removed her dinner. Victoria's face changed. Your Majesty, I think there has been a misunderstanding. Perhaps. Alexander's voice remained composed. Then the truth. We'll have nothing to fear. Emily's heart began to pound. She did not want anyone punished. She did not want the entire ballroom focused on her. All she wanted was to finish her work and return home unnoticed. But Alexander looked at her as though he saw something everyone else had missed. Then he asked one final question. Emily, did you come here tonight believing you were less important than everyone else? She opened her mouth, but no answer came. The silence itself was enough. Alexander's expression softened. Then someone has taught you the wrong lesson. Alexander did not move. He simply waited, giving Emily the silence she needed to answer. Around them, the ballroom remained frozen, the musicians quiet, the guests watching with an interest that made Emily's face grow warm. Finally, she whispered, I suppose I learned it a long time ago. Alexander's expression softened. From whom? Emily looked toward Victoria. She did not accuse her. She did not need to. Victoria's uncomfortable silence answered for her. Before anyone could speak, the royal steward returned with 2 attendants carrying a fresh meal. Warm bread. Roasted chicken. Mashed potatoes. Green beans. Sliced apples. A glass of water. The simple sight made Emily's stomach tighten again. She had not realized how hungry she truly was until then. Alexander gestured toward the table. Sit. Emily hesitated. But my duties are finished. She looked around uncertainly. Your Majesty, I still have guests to serve. Alexander glanced across the ballroom. There are more than enough servants here. His voice remained calm. You have done enough. Emily slowly walked toward the nearest empty chair. She could feel every eye following her. She sat carefully, almost expecting someone to tell her she had taken the wrong seat. No one did. Alexander remained standing nearby. He did not touch her food. He did not rush her. He simply watched as she picked up the piece of warm bread. Emily took one small bite. The warmth spread through her mouth, and for a moment, she closed her eyes. It was such a simple thing. Yet tears suddenly gathered in her eyes. She quickly looked down. Thank you, she whispered. Alexander heard her. You do not have to thank me for dinner. Emily looked up. I am not used to people noticing. The king's gaze held hers. I noticed. Across the ballroom, Victoria shifted uneasily. She had expected Emily to remain invisible. She had expected Alexander to admire the polished Omega guests, not the quiet girl who had spent the evening carrying trays. Now every second seemed to pull attention toward Emily. Victoria stepped forward with a carefully composed smile. Your Majesty, perhaps the mating ball should continue as planned. Alexander looked at her. It will. He paused. But not before I understand what happened tonight. Victoria's smile disappeared. Emily immediately shook her head. Please. I do not want trouble. Alexander turned back to her. Emily, asking for fairness is not causing trouble. Those words settled somewhere deep inside her. She had spent years believing that being kind meant accepting whatever people decided to give her. She had never considered that kindness could exist alongside dignity. Alexander returned to the royal table, but before he sat down, he looked toward the steward. "Bring me the original guest list." The steward nodded and left. Emily continued eating slowly, still uncertain whether she deserved to be there. Then the ballroom doors opened again. The steward returned carrying a sealed parchment. He approached the king and handed it over. Alexander broke the seal and unfolded the document. His eyes moved down the list. Then they stopped. His expression changed. "Emily Carter," he said quietly. She looked up. Alexander raised his eyes from the parchment. "Why was your name placed first?" "Sua." For a moment, Emily could not breathe. Her name remained at the top of the parchment, written in elegant black ink beneath the royal seal. She looked from the document to Alexander, unable to understand why something so ordinary could have suddenly changed the mood of the entire ballroom. "I do not know," she said softly. Alexander studied the parchment again. "Your name was entered before every other Omega." Emily lowered her eyes. "Perhaps it was a mistake." "No," the answer came quietly. "It was not." Victoria stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the list was prepared weeks ago. There may have been an administrative error." Alexander looked at her. "Then we should be able to explain it." He handed the parchment to the steward. "Read the original instructions." The steward unfolded another page attached beneath the list. His eyes moved across the writing, and his expression became serious. "The royal invitation specifically requests that Emily Carter be presented at the mating ball." A murmur moved through the guests. Emily stared at the floor. She had never seen that invitation. No one had told her she was expected to attend as anything other than a servant. Victoria quickly shook her head. "That cannot be right." Alexander's gaze remained on the document. "Why not?" Victoria hesitated. "Because Emily is not a suitable candidate." The ballroom became very still. Emily felt the old familiar shame return. She wanted to disappear again. But Alexander closed the parchment and looked directly at Victoria. "Who decided that?" Victoria opened her mouth, then stopped. The answer was obvious. Alexander turned to Emily. "Did you know you were invited as one of the candidates?" "No, Your Majesty." "Did anyone tell you that you were expected to stand before the royal court tonight?" "No." "Did anyone tell you that your name was first on this list?" Emily shook her head. Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he looked toward the steward. "How many Omegas were officially invited?" 24, Your Majesty." "And how many were presented tonight?" 23. Emily's heart skipped. One person had been missing. Her. The realization moved through the room like a quiet shock. Victoria's carefully composed expression finally broke. "Your Majesty, there is a reasonable explanation." Alexander did not raise his voice. "Then give it." Victoria looked at Emily. She would never have been chosen. Emily's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She had heard those words in different forms for years. Too quiet. Too ordinary. Too weak. Never enough. But this time, something felt different. Alexander turned toward the center of the ballroom. The mating ball was created so that every eligible Omega could stand before the moon court without being judged by family status. He looked back at Emily. No one has the right to remove her from that choice. The musicians remained silent. The candles flickered above them. Emily slowly stood. "Your Majesty, I do not need to be chosen." Alexander's expression softened. "Perhaps not." He extended one hand toward her. "But you deserve the chance to choose for yourself." Emily stared at his hand. Then she looked around the ballroom, at the people who had never noticed her until tonight. Finally, she took a quiet breath and stepped forward. Alexander waited. And for the first time that evening, Emily was no longer standing at the edge of the room. She was walking toward the center, the ballroom seemed to hold its breath as Emily stepped toward the center. Her heart beat faster with every step, yet Alexander remained perfectly still, his hand extended without pressure or expectation. She stopped a few feet from him. For years, Emily had learned to make herself smaller whenever important people entered a room. Now the entire royal court was watching her walk into the light. "You may stand here," Alexander said quietly. Emily looked at him. "I am not sure I belong here." "That is not for them to decide." His words settled over her with unexpected warmth. Behind them, the royal steward approached with the official parchment. "Your Majesty, the presentation ceremony is ready." Alexander nodded. The musicians began a slow, ceremonial melody. One by one, the invited Omegas stepped forward, each introduced by name and family. Victoria stood among them with perfect confidence, surrounded by approving smiles. Emily remained beside the king, uncertain why he had placed her there. Then the royal steward announced, "Emily Carter." The room became silent. Emily took one slow breath and stepped forward. No one laughed. No one whispered. She simply stood beneath the silver light of the chandeliers while the moon court elders observed her. One elder studied the parchment. "Emily Carter of the Northern Territory." Emily nodded. "Yes. Do you willingly present yourself tonight?" Emily hesitated. She looked at Alexander. He gave her a small nod, reminding her that the decision belonged to her. "Yes," she answered. The words were quiet, but they carried across the ballroom. The ceremony continued. Yet something strange happened. Alexander did not look at the other candidates with the same attention he gave Emily. He watched her closely, as though he were trying to understand a feeling he could not name. When the final candidate stepped forward, the elder turned toward the king. "Your Majesty, the moon court has witnessed every presentation. You may now make your choice." Emily's heart sank. She had expected this moment to come, but hearing it aloud made everything suddenly real. She stepped backward, preparing to return to the edge of the ballroom. Alexander noticed. "Emily." She stopped. "Where are you going?" "Back to my place." His expression softened. "And where is that?" She glanced toward the serving tables. "Over there." Alexander looked toward the empty space where she had spent the evening standing. Then he looked back at her. "Not tonight." A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Victoria's face became tense. Alexander walked toward Emily, stopping several feet away. He did not touch her. He simply offered his hand once more. "You came here believing you were invisible," he said. "But I have been watching you all evening." Emily's eyes filled with uncertainty. "Why?" Alexander paused. For the first time, the calm king seemed almost searching for the right words. "Because everyone in this room was trying to impress me." His gaze remained on her. "You were the only one trying to help someone else." Emily looked down. "I did not do anything special." "That is exactly what makes it special." The moon court elder slowly rose from his seat. His voice carried through the silent ballroom. "Your Majesty, the final choice awaits." Alexander turned toward the assembled court. Then he looked back at Emily. His next words were quiet, but everyone heard them. "I already know who I want standing beside me." Alexander's words seemed to echo beneath the chandeliers. "I already know who I want standing beside me." Emily stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. The ballroom remained silent. Even the musicians had stopped playing. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "you cannot mean me." Alexander looked directly at her. "I do." A ripple of surprise moved through the court. Victoria stepped forward, her voice carefully controlled. "Your Majesty, perhaps you should reconsider." There are many noble omegas here who are far better suited to stand beside the crown. Alexander turned toward her. I did not ask who was better suited. His gaze returned to Emily. I asked myself who I wanted. Emily's heart raced. She looked around the room and saw dozens of faces staring at her. Some were shocked. Some were confused. A few seemed almost offended that the quiet girl from the serving table had suddenly become the center of the royal ceremony. Emily lowered her voice. Why me? Alexander did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer and spoke so only she could hear. Because when no one was watching, you were kind. Emily's eyes stung. That should not be enough to choose someone. Perhaps not, he replied. But it tells me more than a beautiful dress or a perfect family name ever could. The elder of the Moon Court lifted his ceremonial staff. Your Majesty, the choice must be freely given by both parties. Alexander nodded. He looked at Emily again. Then I will not choose for you. He extended his hand. Emily Carter, will you choose to stand beside me? The question stunned her. She had expected a command. She had expected the king to announce his decision and leave her no choice. Instead, he was giving the decision back to her. Emily looked at his open hand. She thought about the empty plate taken from her earlier. She thought about the years of being told to stay quiet, stay useful, and stay out of sight. She thought about how strange it felt to be asked what she wanted. If I say no, she whispered. Alexander answered without hesitation. Then I will respect your answer. Something inside Emily finally loosened. For the first time that night, she felt safe enough to make a decision that belonged entirely to her. She placed her hand in his. The moment their hands met, the silver candles around the ballroom flickered. Gently. A soft glow appeared across the polished floor, spreading like moonlight over still water. The Moon Court elder took a slow breath. The bond recognizes the choice. Emily looked at Alexander in disbelief. What does that mean? The elder smiled. It means the moon has heard you. Alexander's expression softened as he looked at Emily. He did not claim her. He simply stood beside her. Then he turned toward the entire ballroom. Let everyone remember this moment. His voice carried clearly through the hall. Emily Carter was never chosen because she was the most powerful person in this room. He glanced at her. She was chosen because she never needed power to prove her worth. Emily felt tears gather in her eyes. Across the ballroom, Victoria stood completely silent. The same people who had barely noticed Emily an hour earlier were now watching her as though she had become someone entirely different. But Emily knew the truth. She had not changed. They had simply finally seen her. And then the Moon Court elder raised the ceremonial staff. The final rite begins now. The final rite began beneath the silver glow of the chandeliers. Emily stood beside Alexander at the center of the ballroom, her hand still resting gently in his. The Moon Court elders formed a quiet circle around them as the musicians began a slow, graceful melody. Emily could hear her own heartbeat beneath the music. She had never imagined standing here. Not as a servant. Not as someone waiting in the shadows. But as the woman the Alpha King had chosen to stand beside. The eldest court member lifted the ceremonial staff toward the tall windows. Beyond the glass, the full moon hung over the palace gardens, bright enough to paint the marble floor with silver light. Emily Carter, the elder said, do you accept this bond freely? Emily looked at Alexander. He did not speak for her. He simply waited. I accept, she said. The words were soft, but the Moon Court heard them. The silver light suddenly grew brighter. A gentle warmth moved through the ballroom, surrounding Emily and Alexander without touching anyone else. Gasps rose from the crowd. Emily looked down at her hand. A delicate silver mark had appeared near her wrist, glowing faintly beneath the candlelight. Alexander looked at his own hand and found a matching mark. The elder lowered the staff. The moon has answered. Silence followed. Then the elder spoke again. This is not a choice made from status, wealth, or family influence. The bond recognizes the sincerity of both hearts. Emily felt tears gather in her eyes. She remembered the empty plate from earlier. The cold corner where she had been told to stand. The quiet shame she had carried into the ballroom. Somehow, all of it felt far away now. Alexander turned toward her. Are you all right? Emily nodded. I think I am still trying to understand. A small smile appeared on his face. So am I. That answer surprised her. She had imagined the Alpha King as someone who always knew exactly what to do. Yet in this moment, he looked almost relieved that she had chosen him willingly. Across the ballroom, Victoria remained silent. Her confidence had disappeared, replaced by a quiet realization that Emily had never needed to compete with her. The king had seen something different. The elder turned toward the assembled guests. Tonight, the moon has reminded this court that worth cannot be measured by clothing, family name, or position. Emily lowered her eyes, but Alexander gently said, "Look up." She did. He nodded toward the room. You do not need to hide anymore. Emily slowly looked across the ballroom. The same people who had ignored her earlier were now watching with respect. Some lowered their heads. Others smiled. No one told her to return to the serving table. No one asked her to carry another tray. Alexander turned toward the royal steward. Prepare the royal table. The steward bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. Emily looked at him, uncertain. The royal table? Alexander smiled. You have spent the entire evening serving everyone else. He gestured toward the grand table beneath the moonlit windows. Tonight, you sit with me. Emily took a slow breath. The ballroom doors opened, revealing the moonlit palace gardens beyond. For the first time, she did not feel like she was being invited into someone else's world. She felt as though a new place had finally opened for her. And as Alexander offered his hand once more, Emily realized the girl who had arrived unnoticed would not be leaving the same way. The royal table had never felt so quiet. Emily sat beside Alexander beneath the tall windows, where moonlight spilled across the polished floor and turned every silver plate into a pale reflection. Only a few hours earlier, she had been standing near the serving table, afraid to take even a bite of food without permission. Now a warm dinner waited in front of her. Roasted chicken, buttered potatoes, green beans, fresh bread, and a small dish of sliced apples filled the place before her. Emily stared at it for a moment. Alexander noticed. You can eat, he said gently. She gave a nervous smile. I know. Then why are you waiting? Emily looked down at her hands. I suppose I am still getting used to this. Alexander understood. He reached for his glass but did not take his eyes from her. You should never have had to get used to being overlooked. Emily took a small piece of bread. This time, no one reached for it. No one told her to put it down. No one reminded her that she was supposed to serve others first. She took a bite and slowly relaxed. Around them, the ballroom had changed. The guests had returned to their tables, but their conversations were quieter now. Everyone had witnessed the Moon Court's decision. Everyone knew that Emily Carter had freely chosen to stand beside the Alpha King. Victoria remained with her family near the opposite side of the room. She looked toward Emily several times, but Emily no longer felt the need to shrink beneath her gaze. Alexander noticed that too. You are not looking at the floor anymore, he said. Emily glanced up and smiled faintly. You told me not to. I did. A quiet laugh escaped her. It was the first genuine laugh she had allowed herself that evening. Alexander smiled in return. Then the royal steward approached. Your Majesty, the court wishes to know whether the royal announcement should be made tonight. Alexander looked at Emily. Only if she wants it. Emily blinked. You mean I can decide? Of course. She looked across the ballroom. Earlier, she would have been terrified of every whisper. Now she saw something different. She saw people listening. She saw people thinking. She saw the same room where she had once felt invisible, and somehow it no longer seemed so large. Emily took a slow breath. Yes, she said. Let them know. The steward bowed and stepped toward the center of the ballroom. The musicians fell silent once more. The announcement was simple. Emily Carter had been recognized by the Moon Court as the chosen mate of Alpha King Alexander Blackwood, and her place beside him had been accepted by royal decree. Applause slowly filled the hall. Emily's eyes grew bright. Alexander leaned slightly toward her. You all right? Yes, she whispered. I just never imagined this. He looked toward the plate in front of her. Neither did I. Emily smiled. You were watching me for a long time. I was. Why? Alexander considered the question. Because everyone else was looking at what you could offer them. His eyes softened. I wanted to know who you were when you thought nobody was watching. Emily looked at him, finally understanding. Her kindness had not made her weak. Her quietness had not made her invisible. And the years she had spent being overlooked had never made her less worthy. Alexander lifted his glass toward her. To your first night at the royal table. Emily lifted hers. And hopefully my last night at the serving table. Alexander smiled. That part is guaranteed. Beneath the silver moon, Emily took another bite of dinner. This time, she did not hesitate. She belonged at the table. She always had. And as the music began again, the girl who had once been told she had not earned a meal finally understood something far greater: she had never needed to earn her worth at all.